in Bareilly, where Priyanka Chopra went to school. That is one crowning glory of that journey at the age of 8 or 10 max. I think girl making it to the big stage in the world, and making the whole country proud, and used to perform on the All India radio.
Oh,
And
lovely. That's brilliant.
yeah, so I think those were the moments which are really etched in my mind when I was an astronaut. And things kept changing through and through.
Because data, they say, is the new oil. We can't just sit in those Stone Ages mindset.
We talk about old money. Old money used to come from oil and real estate. The new money that's coming from data, AI, that you reach out to people and ask them to share their stories and open your eyes to it.
Pertinently raise this question.
I'll just say that if there's a 12th class fail, there's also a hustlers that's coming along.
Vikram Sarabhai once said, he said that sky is not the limit. It is just the beginning. And if we
how everyone says that you are a sum total of the 5 people you interact with the most.
Absolutely.
In this world, you have the option of choosing those 5 people. I could choose to be listening to Navjot. I could choose to be listening to Paul Graham. I could be choosing to listen to Sam Altman. Well, that's a lot to unpack there. Never ends that, okay, I've become a civil servant and now I'll stop having that conversation. No. Oh, I've built a startup of my own and now I can just sit back and relax. No, I don't think so. It's something that, you need to keep doing. You need to start contributing to the society. We have to convince our parents and show them the world. They're also living this 2024 for the first time, and they might not have all the tools to do it.
That's the point. That's a very, very good point, actually.
Yeah. I mean, Ivy Leagues, I got into Princeton, Harvard, Columbia. These are the ones that I applied to. Then I got into NYU and UC Berkeley.
Ladies and gentlemen, here's a person. We are unable to get into one institute, and she got into 9, and she rejected Harvard and Oxford. I mean, can you believe that, ladies and gentlemen? So that's something new.
I don't want to make it a term, but yeah, that's what I've become.
Yeah, that's lovely.
I would say critical thinking. And I think the spirit of collaboration that there is in the American education system is, again.
Dr. Jaishankar has been the new poster boy of India's diplomacy, the trailblazing diplomat that we have, strategic choices, and has dehyphenated its stance on various matters of kind of balancing the necklace of diamonds that we proposed.
Questions out, cross them out in your paper. You do not need to answer them. You're not supposed to know them. Do not fall into that trap. Do not get yourself. I'm writing a book. It might come out soon.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Podcast with Champions with your host, Navjot Singh. In this series of podcasts, as you've already seen, we have been bringing men and women of eminence who have created a path-breaking, trail behind them by their body of work and have inspired the youth to lead a life a little extraordinary. Our today's guest, a very, very special guest and a dear friend, Ajita Agarwala. I think it will take me a lot of, gathering the emotions as well. And to tell a little bit about her, she is a civil servant. 2015 badge UPSC. She qualified the 2015 examination, and eventually she joined the Indian Railway Service. After her illustrious career in the Indian bureaucracy, she had this high wings to fly into the EV League, where I have to tell you that she rejected Harvard and many other EV League universities. And eventually, she's a Princeton alum. She happened to have this education at Princeton. After that, she has worked as Under Secretary at G20. Recently, India headed the G20 presidency. So she played a very key role in certain areas there. She has also worked as a consultant in the World Bank. And her list of accolades go on and on. I can go on and on. So I would not hold you enough, and I'll open the floor to Ajita. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Navjot. That's a very illustrious summary on me. And thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited to be here and talk to your ever so growing audience.
I think the privilege and honor entirely ours. And I have this ritual, or you can say a custom. I start my podcast with a poetry. So this one is
Go ahead.
dedicated to your grit. This is dedicated to your grit. Uh,
Thank
सीढ़ियां हो उन्हें मुबारक जिनको छत तक जाना है सीढ़ियां हो उन्हें मुबारक जिनको छत तक जाना है जिनकी मंजिल हो आसमान उन्हें तो रास्ता खुद बनाना है जिनकी मंजिल हो
क्या बात.
आसमान उनके रास्ता खुद बनाना ladies and gentlemen Ajita Agarwala so
Thank
Ajita
you.
let's yeah you deserve all of it yeah so let's turn the clock back to the formative years of your personality your childhood. Tell us the audience about where you come from about your parents siblings we would love to know a little bit about that as well.
Okay, so I come from Bareilly, a small town in UP, and it's a family of 4 people: my mom and dad and my sister. I studied there till class 6, which is when we moved because my dad is a transferable job. He worked at the UP Power Corporation, and so he was a junior engineer there, and then he moved on to become the subdivisional officer there, and then he climbed the ladder, and we moved places with him. So we started from Bareilly, and then we went to Meerut, and then we found ourselves in the Delhi NCR region eventually. I studied from St. Maria College in Bareilly, where Priyanka Chopra went to school. That is one crowning glory of that town, Bareilly. Priyanka Chopra is from there. I kind of saw her, when I was, imagine me at the age of 8 or 10 max, I think. And I saw this young girl making it to the big stage in the world and, making the whole country proud. And coming from a town like we come from, small towns, it was quite a feat. So I was very inspired by that. And I think it was a pride for the whole nation. And so I think those are some of the most formative, bright spark moments in my life where I was like, oh, even coming from a small town, you can do big things and make the whole country proud of you. So I would say some of the formative experiences with these, coming from small towns and, being in smaller circles, being around people who do great things and are full of, optimism, aspiration, goodwill, all of that. So I embody all of that even up to now.
Absolutely. Yeah. You mentioned about Priyanka Chopra following the American dream and making India proud. I think you have done enough as well, making it to one of the top universities in the US.
Yes.
Ajita, please tell us what was the influence of your father and your mother in shaping your personality and the kind of achiever that you are. How much do you attribute to the initial years of grooming and tutelage that you got through your family?
I think all of it, because again, coming from a small town, they put a lot of energy into who I and my sister have become. So, right from taking us to swimming classes, to music classes, to tennis classes, to, giving us the books that you didn't find in small towns, reading Harry Potter when it came out and not when you watch the movies. It's quite something. So all these things, I think initially your parents, your school teachers, it's important they expose you to the world, outside of your reach when you're young, because you don't have a lot of access at that point. I mean, things have changed with the internet. I think most children have access to everything these days, but back then we didn't, right? So it's the parent, right? So I mean, my parents always focused on giving us the best education. Like my dad would always say, Ajita, I don't have a lot to give you, but I'll give you a good education. So I think that has always played a great role of why I went to the best schools in wherever location I was, whether it was here when I went to UPS Noida, it was all about the best of education. I think the role of good education is not just grades. It's about find like-minded people in these places who are also aspiring to get the best of education and do the best of things. So I think my parents' role in that is tremendous. And even still, I think when I have, stroke of some brilliant idea and I discuss it with my parents, they're always very encouraging as to, I should be pursuing those things. So yeah, most of it I would attribute to my parents. Having a supportive family is something you cannot replace in life.
So was Ajita a very shy child, or she was like an extrovert, was into sports, culturals? Little bit about Ajita the child. How any interesting childhood memory that you can recount and tell the audiences?
Sure. I mean, I would say I was an introvert or an extrovert either. I think I was kind of like an extroverted introvert.
Okay.
So when the moment arose where I had to sort of be out and about, I would do that, but I wouldn't sort of go out of my way to be, in the public eye. So I guess, so when I was very young, I used to learn Hindi classical music. And so I did Hindustani music training back in Bareilly. And I used to perform on the All India radio. And,
Oh, lovely. That's brilliant.
yeah. So I think those were the moments which are really etched in my mind when I'd have the mic in front of me and my voice would quiver a bit and then I'd just own the mic completely. So, I think that sort of a thing hasn't died, being scared of what you're doing for the first time and then completely owning it up and making it yours. So I think that is one of those memories which are completely etched and sort of inspirational also because, we still listen to those recordings sometimes when all of us are together.
Nostalgia, all nostalgia coming back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm second guessing this, but had Ajita not been a civil servant, so we could have seen you making career in classical music.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't sing Hindustani classical music anymore. But yeah, music is just one of those things. If you don't,
rich repertoire of your skill set definitely adds to that.
I mean, I do have a backup just in case nothing else works out.
Absolutely, yeah. You don't need a backup. You are such a talented person. So, Ajita, you chose to study engineering. Any specific reason? Were you always into, what was your childhood dream? Did you always wanted to get into civil services, or that happened by chance? And how come this? Please talk us through your mind. How did your career evolve?
The career, or the idea of a career that I wanted to have. Well, I mean, I would say that, my career goals, they kept changing with the times. And as rightly so. I mean, I never got stuck on one thing. Whoever was inspirational at the time was what I wanted to become. When teachers were inspirational, I wanted to become a teacher. When NASA astronauts were inspiring, then I wanted to become an astronaut. And things kept changing through and through. But it's just that I would say engineering, coming from a middle class background that I do, I think it's one of those things which is in India considered a safe option.
Absolutely.
And I wouldn't read too much of inspiration into it, but sometimes you got to do stuff to, secure bases. And that's what I did. I did engineering, not because it was the thing that I wanted to do, but it was just something I was kind of like good at, like sciences were always something I was good at. I always got good grades. So, like how we always say that whatever you do is a mix of what you're good at, what you want to be, and, what your heart desires. So I think I covered just one base with that. And engineering, I always thought it gives you the kind of skills and the kind of logical reasoning that you might need anywhere else in life. And I was right. Now that I think back, I would have done engineering again, perhaps. So engineering happened because of that. And
if I can reconnect it and recount the what our legendary president Dr. Kalam said, that be extraordinary in whatever you do, and eventually you'll be successful in life. And I think that's what you followed. You did your things with excellence, and that's helped you land up where you are today. And like after engineering, like we will talk about busting a few myths there, but let's first come to your transition from after engineering, the shift to civil services. I mean, civil services is a career. So talk us through that as well.
So I would say that during my engineering years, I wrote a couple of research papers on nanoelectronics. That's what I was kind of pursuing at the time. And while I was doing that, I came across that question, but is it commercially viable? Yes, in theory it's good, the model works, whatever, but is it commercially viable? And that led me to think a lot of things, like why is it not commercially viable still? Why not India? Why don't we have a lot of fabs? Why don't we have that ecosystem which enables us to be the next chip maker, or those kind of things? So I think, coming to the sort of big policy questions, while I was researching was one of the reasons why I thought being in the policy making space would be an interesting career option where you have a lot of impact. And while the word impact might be the most cliched words out there present, but I really think that whatever we do, whether it be on a small scale or a global scale, whatever that might be, is changing some lives. And in India, I really thought that it's the civil services that's changing a lot of lives. So that's why I wanted to be in the civil services. And just the fact that, in your career, that you can work in so many different streams, whether it be the Ministry of Railways or the Ministry of Labor or any kind of mighty, wherever you want to go, there is, some sort of vacancy that you can apply to once you're in the civil services. So I really was, taken by that idea, and that's why I got into the services.
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned about the lack of labs and research, I mean, as per the data, but the government of India only 0.69% of the GDP is spent on R and research and development. So that's, I think that's quite meager as compared to what the developed countries of the world they are investing. And I think a lot of it has to go into this direction as well. When we are in the age of big data, we are into generative AI and machine learning. I think the time is right that we transition as a nation. We transition to the embrace these technologies, and because that's the way to the future. What do you say? Because data, they say, is the new oil. We can't just sit in those stone ages mindset and just be left behind. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Data is the new oil. And so this article came out in 2017 in The Economist, Data is the New Oil. And I remember calling up my sister and being like, you should read this article. This is so true, So I think it's one of those things that changes the face of humanity completely. We talk about old money. Old money used to come from oil and real estate. The way people now are changing the world, the new money that's coming from data, AI, AI, ML, all of those things which are needed to fine tune our world and make it more efficient. So I do definitely think that the next wave of investments has to be done in this sector, and India must not lead this wave, at all, because this is where the next stage of development is, and which will, make you leapfrog into all sorts of things.
Rightly said, rightly said. And also, as we see that there are fears about AI replacing a lot of jobs, and with the market already, so much there is crunch there. Job market is already too much pressed for resources, and unemployment at an all-time high. So, in that respect, I think, I mean, we are moving towards skilling our youth through India Skills Mission and all the different strategies that we've been using. But at the same time, how do you think the digital penetration and digital literacy to the last mile? How can that happen and ensure that we just not become using tech aware as well as tech knowledgeable. That intellectual revolution that we need to create, that cannot be without the embracing the technology and getting youth into it. Because I mean that way we are, as one of the reports said, 45 something percent of the youth is unemployable. The graduates, they come out, but they are unemployable because they lack basic skills. So that definitely the transition has to happen.
Right. I absolutely agree. In the sense, AI has created a lot of jobs too. Who would have thought there would be prompt engineers? Nobody thought that. Nobody, before coming of Google, who would have thought we'd live without, physical maps? So when things change, when new technologies come, yes, there's always this Luddite sort of a fear that, new age tech will replace all the jobs, like the spinning jenny will replace all the jobs. People who were making, garments before, they would be completely replaced. But it's all about reskilling and upskilling yourself in the times that we live in. We can't live in an age where you don't know how to create prompts, where you don't know what an SEO is, where you don't know where, how you can make your own apps or your own websites. These kind of things have become so easy, and tech is making it easy for you to create your own website, while it's also making a lot of web developers out of job, but it's making it easy for you to open your own business, open your own website. So all these things are enablers, as I would see it. And you just have to know how to use them. You have to be able to rein the new technology in and create something out of it. Because you can't live in the age where you say, oh, I don't know how to use Excel. I don't know how to use Microsoft Office, because the world has leaped by bounds. Yeah.
It's changed. What has changed? So coming back to the engineering question, I mean, generally in our times, it was like the conventional wisdom. If you're good in studies, you will take either engineering or medicine. And I think that thing should change now. The parents as well as the students, they have to look forward to the diverse career options that are there. And particularly if we talk about civil services, we extend it to the civil services and other career choices that have become limited. You get into the army, join the civil services, or for that matter, some other services. Don't you think the youth has to look beyond this? Because in a country of 140 crore, 1.4 billion plus people, we hardly have less than 2 crore government jobs. So rather than job seekers, it's time that we become job creators and job givers. So that transition, apart from that, the diversification of career choices and the mindset change has to happen. So how do you see the landscape evolving in this respect? And how can we, having been through that process, how can we, leave some message for the youth? And what are your viewpoints on that and busting a few myths there?
I think it's important for people to catch a wave of the trends that are going. And for that, you need to be aware of trends. You need to open your eyes. Eyes wide shut is what's the case right now, because you're on social media the whole time. You're exposed to a lot of people, and if you still remain shut to the opportunities that are available to you, then that's a case of eyes wide shut. So I think that it's important that you talk to a lot more people. I always keep saying that whenever you are in doubt, whenever you are, looking at something which is new to you, have 100 conversations. Talk to people who might know more than you. Because today is the time where everyone is so accessible. I'm accessible on LinkedIn. I'm accessible on Instagram. I'm accessible through your podcast. There are so many other people like me who are accessible, who tell you the inside story of, how life is with all these things, with all the traditional jobs that we have been, aspiring to get. So I think it's very important that you reach out to people and ask them to share their stories and open your eyes to it. They will share it, but are you taking something back? Are you getting what you were looking for? So I think a lot of confirmation bias also goes in, where people just listen what they want to listen.
Correct.
Right. So when movies like 12 Plus Fail comes in, and you see,
actually
you know.
I was
So,
I was
you know,
coming to that. Let's build on that idea, because movies like 12th Pass, they kind of over glorify this pattern of civil services and all. I think that this youth has to see through it, and I think even the producers and the art directors and creators and filmmakers, they need to send a slightly different message as well, because this way, what the youth is inclined into, that this is this is the thing. So that has to. What do you say? I was wanting to discuss this thing with someone. I think you pertinently raised this question.
I'll just say that if there's a 12th class fail, there's also a hustlers that's coming alongside,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Like there is stuff which is also glorifying entrepreneurship at the moment. So which brings me back to my confirmation bias. You just see what you want to see, right? So this is something which I really got inspired by, which is my travels. When
Mhm.
there are cultural exchange programs, or when you travel young and you see the world for what it is, that
Right.
opens up your eyes for good. And you see things you cannot
Absolutely.
unsee. You cannot unsee
Absolutely.
those things. If you go to
Absolutely.
a different societal setup, it doesn't matter if you're going from the north to the south of India. It's a different societal cultural setup altogether, right?
Indeed.
Kind of feudal mindset that you have in the north, you don't in the south. If you go to the northeast, it's a completely different attitude towards life, and expectations and
Yeah.
aspirations in life. It's completely different. So I
Indeed.
would personally say that if people take the time to travel a little bit and expose themselves to new ways of being, I think that is something which will really open their eyes and open up avenues which they didn't think existed, right? So it's easier to knock on doors which you think exist, but what about those that you don't even know exist? So
Yeah.
I think it's really incredibly important that people take the time to immerse themselves in a different mindset, and
And
that's something that you have to take an initiative yourself. It's not
absolutely.
something that
Absolutely.
someone can force upon you.
But those of them that don't have the luxury to travel because of certain various reasons, what would be your suggestion to them to expose themselves to variety of worldviews, variety of perspectives, maybe reading books, watching good literature, good documentaries, good movies? What is your suggestion to the youth who would want to expand their worldview, who would want them to get exposed to a lot of new perspectives? Because वो कुएं का मेंढक वाला concept, we remain in that pond and we think that pond is the world. Because Vikram Sarabhai once said, when India launched in 1963, we launched our first, that thing into the space. He said that sky is not the limit; it is just the beginning.
Hmm.
And if we can think that sky is not the limit, how can our pond be the limit? It is only the
Right,
limitation of our mind. It limitation of our mind.
right,
So,
right.
what would you suggest to those young boys and girls out there?
I think my suggestion to them would be, yes, definitely watch different movies, read a whole lot of books, read biographies. Biographies are incredibly inspiring for me personally. You could read Obama's, both the Obama's biographies, Lee Iacocca's biography, like so many of them out there, and you will see how people who have challenged the trends, people who have challenged their societal norms, no matter where they exist. It could be anywhere in the world, and every different society has different constructs and different limitations. It is their personal curiosity and it is their personal initiative that they take, that they want to break out of the mold. So it's very important that people do that themselves, and that can happen so many which ways, like YouTube, all these interviews that you're doing, taking this initiative to bring out the kind of people that are around you that you've seen yourself, tell their stories. I think this is incredibly important for people to immerse in as well. Like, that's how it happens. You got to, like, how everyone says that you are sum total of the 5 people you interact with the most.
Absolutely, absolutely,
In this
absolutely,
world, you have the option of choosing those 5 people. I could choose to
absolutely.
be listening to Navjot. I could choose to be listening to Paul Graham. I could be choosing to listen to Sam Altman. I could choose any 5 people I want. It doesn't have to be your parents or your schoolmates or, anyone. You could just choose those 5 people and just completely have conversations with them through their talks, through their books, through whatever.
Absolutely. As one of the poet वसीम बरेलवी जी ने बहुत ही सही तरह से एक बात कही है कि उसूलों पे जहां आंच आए तो टकराना जरूरी है. उसूलों पे जहां आंच आए तो टकराना जरूरी है. जो जिंदा हो तो फिर जिंदा नजर आना जरूरी है. You have to challenge the tide. Life was
Yes.
never meant to sit on the coast and watch the tide go by. It was made to venture into the high seas, kiss the tornadoes and embrace the tempest. That's where your magic lies, into the high seas. So that's what Ajita said very clearly. She exemplified that we need to go out there and find for ourselves what magic is there inside us. We can't just, the biggest risk is not taking any risk at all. Take risks, find for yourself, because in this short journey that we have on this planet, we have to, as Aristotle once said, we have this potentiality and then we actualize it. If we remain a potential and we don't actualize it, we remain at the, that we remain matter. We are form as well, we are mind. We have to, get over that place. So very beautifully said by Ajita. Building on to that concept, where we said that we have to challenge the tide, we have to challenge the conventional wisdom. So how, for example, currently we see we need to choose our role models also very carefully. These days we see in the world of social media, there is a lot of information, volcano information, upheaval is happening. We have to choose what is the correct, thing to follow. And what do you suggest? Like, for example, uh, the impressionable young minds, they aren't that wise and in their tender young years to decide what is right and what is wrong. Isn't it the responsibility of the senior folks who have risen in life, who have served in various maybe in the government or outside of the government, have done something of value? Isn't their responsibility to act a little more responsibly and spread that correct message forward? For example, saying that out of his conversations, I could make that hate and anger towards Pakistan or for that matter, any other country. I think we don't need to hate anyone else to love our own country. So that, do we need to go to the limit of jingoism? Does our patriotism not focus on building our own thing or, working on enhancing our skills rather than belittling someone? So what is your take and what do you suggest the youth to, come out of this narrow-minded mindset?
Well, that's a lot to unpack there. But I would say, starting from your first strand there, I think it's very important for people who have made their own path to reach out to sort of broadcast their own voices in this creator economy that we live in. It's very important for the young minds to listen to the actual stories. It's important for people to listen to people who have not cleared UPSC. It's important to hear their stories, what they did after 6 failed attempts. It's important to hear, what people did by becoming AIR1. It's important to hear that as well, right? It's important to hear these stories after 5 years of them having made it or haven't made it there. So it's very important to hear these stories time and again at some intervals of time. And I think, like you very rightly said, it's not important to it's not even tasteful at all to belittle someone, to make yourself feel better, because I think it's a very temporary sort of a thing where you can make yourself feel better, but you aren't actually feeling better. And it's all about building yourself in life. I mean, that's the goal. It's not about what people think of you. It's not about what the society thinks about you. It's just maybe your closest friends and your parents and your siblings. If you can convince them of what you're trying to do and what you have built for yourself so far, I think that is enough to live a good, happy life. And so I think it's the narrow mindset, I would say, is not really narrow. It's just super wide. when you're trying to please everyone. You can't please everyone. You have to just first start with pleasing yourself on the basis of what you have done and what you want to do, and fill the gaps in between. Right. So that's what I would say to that. To have a broader mindset is to be more inward, I think. And that's what it is about. You have to think more about yourself, where you were 10 years ago, where you've come so far, where do you want to be. I think this is a conversation that you need to keep having with yourself constantly. It's not something that ever ends, that, okay, I've become a civil servant and now I'll stop having that conversation. No. Oh, I've built a startup of my own and now I can just sit back and relax. No, I don't think so. It's something that, you need to keep doing. You need to start contributing to the society in which you live. You need to scale it up. You need to keep doing it. I think that's all there is to life.
Yeah. I think if I were to sum up what you said is, whenever you cannot go outside, go inside, go inwards, find your own mojo, find your own self. And I would like to build on to that point a little bit further also, that I mean, qualifying the examination or not qualifying an examination, be it any examination, I think it doesn't define a person's worth. I think youth, recently we heard incidents of students committing suicides in quota and other things, people happening, not getting good grades. So do we do that? Do we need to impress upon the youth? I mean, see, they have to understand that there's more to life than just getting good grades. I think there's a responsibility of society in general, parents as well, to not make it all about getting good grades. Uh, Being successful in life and being successful at school are two totally different things. So how do we get this message across to the youth and to the wider society, parents particularly?
I think parents need to, again, see all these stories where people make it big despite failing at multiple stages in their lives. And it's about the persistence and the unadulterated support that the parents can provide to students, especially in their struggling times, where there's no rope to hang on to sometimes. You sometimes,
Mhm.
whatever you're feeling, whatever situation you're in might seem like the end of it. Like, if I don't get into, an IIT, then, my life is ruined. Or if I don't get into the civil services, I can't do anything else after that. It's not about that. It's more about how you can learn from that lesson and leverage on it and build something more after that. So I think parents need to understand that. And I think it's more of a generational gap also here, because the kind of opportunities that are available to our generation were not available in our parents' generations. For them, it was
Right.
all about being in an organization, climbing up the ladders and retiring as the head person of some division or the company or the government or whatever. That kind of a set path is not the luxury that our generation has. It's not something that we can afford at this time. We can switch jobs, we can move to different countries, we can build something of our own, we can access financing, we can do so many things just because of the times we were born in. And I think it is actually the children's duty to explain it to their parents and tell them this difference, that we're not from the same generation. What offers we have, you didn't have. If I wanted to create an Instagram channel and be an influencer, I can. You didn't have this opportunity, you know? So those kind of things people need to kind of understand themselves to convince their own parents, because you can't expect parents to understand that by themselves. Right?
Right, right.
So I think I always am a believer of how families need to grow. It's not just Navjot or Ajita who grows by themselves. We have to convince our parents and show them the world.
Absolutely.
They're
Absolutely.
also living this 2024 for the first time, and they might not have all the
Absolutely.
tools to do it.
That's the
Right?
point. That's a very, very good point, actually.
Yeah.
Very good point. Yeah.
So I think our parents need to walk with us, and it's our responsibility to, make them do that.
Absolutely. Very well put up. And also, I mean, another thing before we move to another point, uh, the over glorification of achievers and non-recognitions of non-achievers. No, I would believe in life there is nothing failure as such, but the societal parlance, this media hype and about certain things, which this is also one of the reasons why the youth is attracted to certain things. For example, a defense aspirant may see an SF commando talking about certain things, so
Right.
he may get enticed. A civil service aspirant may see a IAS of IAS, IPS Royal Entry videos, but life is not just rosy. It's not all
Hmm.
sipping martinis and having a gala time. Life is doing those tough yards. So I think that also somehow I think the selected people of different field they थोड़ा सा responsibility वहाँ पे भी उनको दिखाना पड़ेगा कि भाई थोड़ा सा
I mean,
reality.
I I remember this incident when I got into the civil services. All these people who were just like congratulating me, they didn't know what came after IRS. IAS पता है, IPS पता है, फॉरेन सर्विसेज को लोग फॉरेस्ट सर्विसेज बोलते हैं, IRS और इंडियन रेलवे सर्विसेज को मर्ज कर देते हैं. लोगों को नहीं पता है, people don't know what they're talking about, you know. उनको IAS अलाइड पता है क्योंकि वो
No
पिछले
difference.
जमाने में वर्ड यूज होता था. That's about it.
Absolutely.
So I would
Yeah.
just say don't do anything to please people because they don't care.
Absolutely. Yeah.
आप आज किसी पोस्ट पर हैं, कल नहीं है, कोई नहीं पूछने वाला आपको.
Absolutely. Bang on.
Nobody cares if you were DM today and you become, कहीं का कुछ और. They will not care. They don't know. They will be like, अरे ये problem होगी, can you solve this for us? If you can't solve it, you're useless to them.
You're no good. You're no good.
You're absolutely nobody for them.
Yes.
And those problems could be as silly as कि मेरे घर के सामने किसी ने बैरिकेडिंग लगा दी है, किसी ने ट्रक खड़ा कर दिया, उसको हटवाओ. And you're like, I'm not even there. I don't know who this is, what this is, So don't care about, the people's opinions, which don't matter.
Rightly. And also, people who don't succeed, they shouldn't take their failure also too seriously. And if they have tried enough for that thing. Yeah. So moving on to
Absolutely.
the yeah,
Fail.
absolutely.
Failure is
Correctly, correct.
also very temporary, like success.
Abraham Lincoln won the only election in his life, and that was to become the president of the United States of America. And a
Yeah.
lot of other people are achievers.
There are so many stories. Yeah, and it's not in vain. And these stories are more and more, in the mainstream now than they were ever. So it's important to take note of that and don't be in this ostriches bubble and be like, "Ye mere saath nahi hoga." So it doesn't matter because at some point in your life it'll happen in some way or the other, and you gotta, face that and your metal to
Right.
face those things.
Absolutely. So, I mean, let's talk a little bit about your career in the railway service. For those who are not aware of how this thing works, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities one gets in the railway service? So, could you just demystify whatever the roles and responsibilities, whatever unclassified information you can share, whatever we can see there? So, yeah.
Sure. So I'm from the Railway Traffic Services, and it is one of the services that you get into through the civil services exam. And you could get posted in one of the zones all throughout India. And I was posted in the Central Railway Zone. And I found myself in Solapur district where I was handling about 87 railway stations. And there are so many divisions in the railways, so many of them. I worked in two of them, operations and commercial. So the railways department is kind of responsible for implementing the freight policy and making the optimized routes for different freight carriers. And different regions have different commodities, like some might be doing coal, some might be doing onions, some might be doing grain, some might be doing milks, so many of these things. So I think apart from the regular job that you do in terms of planning and implementation of those things. I think the big question is also about the supply chains that you handle and how you're connecting the farmers to the industry and then to the main market. So I think that's the larger question that you're handling when you're on the railways, whether it be through the sustainability initiatives where you're electrifying the railways, or whether it be through planning for new tracks where you're trying to make new paths. So all these things are all in the purview of a railways officer. So these are the things that you get to handle from day one, and it's quite a big task that you take on from day one. So
Right.
so that is what I would say is the life of a railway traffic service officer.
It's one of the biggest employers in the country. I mean, employs a lot of people, the railways, the Indian railways.
You
And
have a lot of stuff. I was handling 1,200 people who were working, reporting directly to me on day one when I was like, 26 years old. So it's quite a big task. And you might find yourself in states where you don't speak the language and you don't really understand full task at hand from day one, but you have to give them directions and they
right,
expect you to give you directions.
right, right. So could you tell the audiences about where does the training happen, how long it is, and some interesting things that they can look forward to, those who are railway service aspirants?
Sure. So the training happens first in Nair, which is in Baroda, and then you
Baroda.
go on to Lucknow, where the IITS training especially happens. And mostly you're just traveling all over the country. You're traveling different parts of the country by going in small groups, and you go to a coal mining pit, you go to a sail plant, you go to the Northeast, you go to every place just to see how these connections work on the ground. You talk to all the stakeholders, you talk to the railway operators, you talk to the industry specialists, you talk to the private siding people who've built their own private railways. So you talk about all these things with all the stakeholders involved. You might be going for a visit to the Delhi Metro Railway Corporation, the Dedicated Freight Corridor Corporation. You might be doing a lot of these field visits, and in the academy, it's just academics. You're just like taking lessons, but most of the time you're traveling and seeing for yourself what the railways actually is and what the ancillary industries are like.
All right, all right. So what does the future hold for Indian Railways? Are we seeing a bullet train really soon, flying on Indian tracks?
I hope so. I mean, a lot of modernization needs to be there in the railways. And I think we will get there, but it's just a little slow, I guess, for now.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
So now let's turn to the American dream, the EV League dream. That I mean, please share a little bit about that. That how many? I think you got selected to around 10 universities from the EV League, if I'm not wrong.
I mean, I applied to 10, I got into 9.
Oh, wow.
And going to an Ivy League college was always a
Could
dream
you
of
could you
mine.
could you name them, because I would want you to mention that for the audiences, because that's something.
I
Yeah.
mean, Ivy Leagues, I got into Princeton, Harvard, Columbia. These are the ones that I applied to. Then I got into NYU and UC Berkeley and Oxford and Cambridge and a bunch of others I don't even remember now.
So, ladies and gentlemen, here's a person. We are unable to get into one institution. She got into 9, and she rejected Harvard and Oxford. I mean, can you believe that, ladies and gentlemen? So here is Ajita Agarwala, the alumni of Princeton. So let's now go to Princeton. Let's take us through your mind to your days in Princeton. How was it like? And I would like you to share some interesting stories as well, what you studied there, your trip to Hawaii as well. We would love to know all of that. Getting to know the cultures. Yeah.
Oh, so I mean, again, getting into, I have to talk about this. I rejected Harvard and Oxford again because the mindset of people in India, it's it's like Harvard and Oxford are it, and they're not. There are so many other places which are even better, and people don't really buy into that because, again, going to the colonial mindset we talk about, Oxford, and the epitome of American dream is Harvard. So I'd like to first debunk that and go like, there are so many other schools which are better. I will not say doing as well, but better. So, I think this is another thing we need to debunk amongst people who are trying to go to study abroad, because I really think that all these universities are just class apart, and they're giving such good education to everyone, and the opportunities that are available to you, and if you go to any of them, are
Why, why,
just.
why did you choose Princeton over Harvard? I would particularly want you to reason that out for the audiences.
Princeton is just very, very picky, and I was so glad to be one of the people who was picked. And every year in graduate school, they take only one Indian in that program, and I was that one Indian. Why
That's
would I
brilliant.
reject
That's
that?
brilliant. That's
Thank you.
brilliant.
And I really think that it's important to keep finances in mind, because when you are investing in your education, you don't want to come out of a school with debt. You don't want the debt to influence your decisions of what you do after.
Absolutely.
You need to
Absolutely.
feel free to use the window of opportunity that you've created for yourself and not just settle for the best paying thing that comes. So
Mhm.
Harvard doesn't give a lot of scholarship. Oxford does not give a lot of scholarship.
Oh,
Princeton,
they
on the
don't.
other hand, not only gives you full tuition cover, it also gives you a stipend to study. So Princeton was paying me to
Wow,
study. So
that's lovely.
it was a no-brainer for me.
Absolutely
That's
lovely,
why I
lovely.
chose Princeton.
So
And
what did you study? What did you study at Princeton?
I studied Masters of Public Affairs, so which is
Oh,
public administration, public policy, public affairs. These are different names that different schools use for the same course.
absolutely.
So
Hmm.
I did a course in policy.
Okay, okay, okay. So, I mean, you're talking about your experiences. Please carry on. I carry on with that.
So in there it was so fascinating because you have civil servants from all across the world coming to take that course. So you have someone from Lebanon, you have someone from Australia, you have someone from Nairobi, and all these people who are sort of, you know, young. I mean, in the sense, not really mid-career per se, but young into the government systems wherever they come from. They bring in their unique perspectives about how their government is performing in different fields, whether it be the digital ecosystem or semiconductors, for that matter. I keep coming back to it, or like the economy in general. So you have these brilliant conversations that you will have with people, a limited set of people. I had 60 people in my class, and you just, the kind of conversations you would have that you wouldn't otherwise. So I think that is something that I was really excited about when I would wake up every morning there. And I was living in a very Hogwartsian kind of building where it
Yeah,
was
I saw the
super,
pictures. I saw the pictures.
it was just super pretty to wake up in that spot and have these brilliant conversations and find future collaborators in a nurturing atmosphere like Princeton, which would give you resources to do anything you wanted.
That is
So
stuff of dreams.
yeah, that is the stuff of dreams. So I was very glad to be living my dream for 2 years there.
Right, right.
I mean, it
How about
opened
you?
opportunities which sitting in Delhi or in Bareilly you can't imagine. It's just
Absolutely. That,
it's just
absolutely.
life changing that way.
And about the
And now
Hawaii thing,
huh?
Hawaii culture. Please, I mean, I'm interested.
Hawaii culture. I mean, Hawaii is just a very little place. Like, you can just. I got exposed to a lot of. Uh, so this was during the time of COVID. So I got exposed to a lot of digital nomads there who were just living there um, on minimal budget, living in hostels where you meet a lot of people from different walks of life and doing their own thing during the day, and going to a bonfire at the beach in the night. And it was just
That's
something
very
that
nice.
you don't really experience when you're in the city or when you're living here in India. So all these things, I think, have kind of shaped me the way I am. I've kind of now become a hippie bureaucrat. I don't know what that means anymore, but it's kind of like that. Yeah.
That's kind of a
So
new
Hawaii,
term, hippie bureaucrat. Hippie bureaucrat, that's something new.
I don't want to make it a term, but yeah, that's what I've become.
Yeah, that's lovely. And what are the few takeaways that you took from your Princeton course that you think that we can imbibe in our Indian policy setup, or maybe, I mean, our courses in our universities can take that thing up. So for better, bringing good learning outcomes for the youth.
Oh, I would say critical thinking. I don't think we
Hmm.
do a lot of that in Indian
Absolutely. I
academia
agree. I can't agree more on this.
because there's this Gurukul sort of a system that goes on, right? The teacher is always right. I think that was very, very fascinating for me in the American education system, where students were as right as the teacher, and the professor will always think even about the silliest doubt that you might think you've had, and we
Hmm.
try to understand why you asked that question, or what made you
Yeah,
think of that, and
lovely.
encourage you to think more on that. So I think critical thinking is one thing that we could have more of in the Indian education system. And um, and I think the spirit of collaboration that there is in the American education system is again something which I didn't think I had access to when I was in India. There's so much competition here, and you would rarely find collaborators. So I think
Yeah,
American education system plays from the place of abundance, which
yeah,
I
that's
think
that's very
is a
important.
whole,
That's very important. That's very important.
yeah, like it's a whole change in worldview when you don't have to fight for you know printer ink and getting space to hold meetings while you're doing stuff, or having some software subscriptions, or just things like that. They can change the way students
Yeah,
approach
approach. Yeah, yeah.
you know their vocation. Yeah.
Right. So definitely two things or three things that we can take is critical thinking and collaborating. Together we rise. Like we should overcome our insecurities of because nobody is our competition. If we help each other out, we rise, and that's I think that is something that we need to incorporate. That's what Ajita very rightly mentioned here. So, for the young boys and girls who want to enter into EV leagues, could you just explain a little bit about the process of application? And I will tell the audiences that she's guiding the young boys and girls who want to enter. You can connect with her as well on her Instagram, and we will share the links in the description as well. So, please talk us through that. What is the process of applying for these organizations, these institutes, and how can one ensure a good SOP so we can write a good statement of purpose and guarantee one's admission to the particularly through a scholarship. So what would be the way?
Well, apart from taking the right exams, whatever it is, SATs or GRE or GMAT, whatever you're taking, I think the real matter is your statement of purpose and your letters of recommendation. I really think that you need to get your story right. It's all about the story. Nobody cares if you won an Olympiad. Nobody cares. Nobody cares if you won XYZ awards. Nobody cares if you got grade A plus or A minus. But your story needs to be right. Even if you've had a failure, even if you've had a C or a D, it's important that you show in your essay what you took out of it, or why it happened, or those kind of things. So getting your story right is the most important thing while you're applying to these big schools. And honestly, it's your story. You don't need to sprinkle it with all sorts of other inspired stuff. The admission committee really wants to know you, who you are, what you do in your free time, what keeps you awake at night, what keeps you motivated when you wake up in the morning. So these are the things that you need to focus on while you're weaving a story through your CV. You don't need to just write your CV in words when you're making your statement of purpose. So you need to fill it with all sorts of inherent inspiration and things that you really believe in. So that is about the SOP. And LORs, I would say you don't need star people to write your LORs. You don't need the Prime Minister of India or the President of India to write your LORs. You don't need the principal of your school to write your LORs. Anyone who has seen you grow, whether it be your sports teacher, whether it be your maths private tutor, whether it be your music teacher or your first boss or someone who has actually seen you, perform, that's the right person to take your LR from. So I think these are the two things which people often get wrong, and I hope these are such low-hanging fruits that you can get them right.
So it doesn't really matter. I mean, we don't need to get those fancy letter of recommendations.
No, you don't. Trust me, you don't.
Okay, that's
I didn't have any fancy letters of recommendations.
That's lovely. Yeah. That's lovely. That's a myth buster for most of us, including me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where can the aspirants connect with you if they want more on this?
LinkedIn would be a good platform. I usually respond to everything on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Okay, we'll share that link with the aspirants in the description. And moving on from here, I mean, how you have a really rich and diverse profile. We can go on and on. And now towards your experience in G20, where you worked as an undersecretary. I mean, how do you see India's presidency? We did a lot of good work. We made sure that our agendas were put forward, and the communique that came up. I mean, it had the reflection of a lot of good work that we did over the last 1 year in our presidency. So what was your experience, particularly in the startup sector and the disaster reduction? What was your experience in the G20?
So I think India did a very commendable job with the G20 presidency. And being the presidency is never easy because you have to balance all the perspectives and viewpoints of different countries from different alignments. And so it's very difficult to be in that position where you have to keep your own opinion aside and act like a good host and a good chair. So it was a very interesting experience as to the negotiations that I witnessed and I was a part of. So seeing how different countries behave is something that you only sort of maybe read in the books. So to actually be a part of those negotiations was very fascinating for me. And preparing for them and continuously revising drafts to get the final communique out was a very enriching experience, and it's not something that you get on a day-to-day basis. So I'm very grateful to have had that experience after all. And coming to Startup 20 and Disaster Risk Reduction Working Groups, these were the two initiatives that India launched for the first time for the G20. So they were completely novel, and I was leading them. So it was very important for me personally that they floated and went to the next G20 presidency, which is Brazil. And I'm very happy that both of them have. And it was such sheer joy to see something being built from scratch, from the first concept note of the new initiatives to seeing them being handed over to Brazil was something that I cannot even express in words. Everything from ITs to the agenda building, to the panel discussions, to the zero drafts, to having multiple stakeholder consultations, to, everything was just very, how would you say? It was just new to me, and it was just perfect. The way you would want your diplomacy experience to go, it was exactly that. So different startups from different G20 countries came. to all the meetings. And in the disaster world, I had the opportunity to go to the UN to represent India during the same, because this was the mid-year. Last year was the midterm for the Centre. And India was presenting its achievements, and so it was very fascinating for me to even be a part of the UN political level forum. So it was very high-level policy making. It's more like a North Star policy making, I would say. So when people generally ask, so what is the tangible outcome of G20? You might probably not have a policy paper which says that, okay, this is being adopted in XYZ country this year, but it's more like a policy guideline for countries to follow when they make their policies towards these things. So it was a very, very rich experience for me.
Absolutely. I mean, that really shows, and absolutely, India is making really, strides in disaster management, mitigation, whether it be the headquarter agreement with the CDRI or the LIFE initiative that the Prime Minister echoed. So we are making good progress in that. But how do you see these? For example, we have floods happening in certain areas and all these things. So we need to build a little bit more on that as well. Disaster resilience in certain, vulnerable areas. These high tectonic activities happening in these areas as well, and encroachment of floodplains by unplanned urbanization and rehabilitation. So what do you think? I mean, any briefly, if you can tell us about that.
So I think, again, the focus of the working group and disaster risk reduction in general, it's to be more preventive, have reduced risk to disasters. Because these are all natural impulses. You can't change the way tectonic plates are. You can't change the flood proneness of a region. But what you can do is reduce the risk to these things by, in the current sense of things, making retrofitting adjustments to the infrastructure you've built. So infrastructure resilience is a big part of it. And whatever brownfield projects that we have, we need to build those components of resilience into them. And what helps us with retrofitting and just resilience in general is the financing. So it's important that the financing that comes for infrastructure has to be tagged with all these resilience metrics that are in place already. It's only when these things fail that there's less and less of risk resilience, and there's more of disaster proneness. So I think these are the two things. With infrastructure resilience, the matrices that are already in place, they need to be implemented well. And in financing, the tagging of the finances with respect to those infrastructure resilience matrices, they need to be in place so that things can be implemented.
Absolutely. I mean, I would also like to tell the audiences that she also writes columns in newspapers. She wrote on the Startup 20 initiative as well, recommended by Amitabh Khan sir as well. So that's really something that she's making strides in various fields. She has been a consultant at the World Bank. So if we were to talk about a little bit about geopolitics before we conclude as well, it is generally said that if you're not on the table, you're on the menu. And recently, we as a our diplomacy and our foreign policy is being quite assertive. Dr. Jaishankar has been the new poster boy of India's diplomacy, the trailblazing diplomat that we have. In the Munich Security Conference, he also mentioned about having the multitude of options. That what's wrong with that? India is being smart, and it's nothing wrong with that. So what is your take on this? That our foreign policies being assertive to India's own strategic choices and has dehyphenated its stance on various matters of geopolitical importance?
I think that's absolutely the right approach to go, because India needs its own developmental space to operate. It needs its own space to make its own decisions and not be influenced by any bloc or any ideology. And we need to maintain our own heft when it comes to making these decisions, and pick and choose we like. But coming to assertiveness, I would say that the Indian diplomatic corps is not not sufficiently manned. We need a lot more IFS officers. We need a lot more diplomats in our diplomatic corps, so that there is more presence of India on different initiatives in various countries. So it's only through that we can outreach to our diaspora much more and take India's hard and soft power throughout the world. And again, coming back to fabs and semiconductors, I keep coming back to it. Without technology and without diplomats, the country, will always be short of what its potential could be. So it's something that we need to really work on.
Talking about semiconductors and the solar photovoltaic technology, I mean, we are diversifying our resource base, our raw materials through the SCRI, the Supply Chain Resilient Initiative with Japan and Australia, and other initiatives. We are trying to broaden our that intake basket. So how do you see the geopolitics in the Indo-Pacific evolving, with China's always being the aggressor, be it in South China Sea or its aggressive posturing in India's immediate neighborhood, be it Maldives issue, be it in its string of pearls, Hambantota, Sitwe, and then we have this border. And how do you see, and also the CPEC thing always happening? I mean, that has always been in the question. So how do you see we, kind of balancing the necklace of diamonds that we proposed? How do you see it, coming through?
I think the approach that India has taken has been good so far. And it is in the right stride in the sense that we don't want to impose ourselves on someone like China is. But we need to play on our strengths and focus on collaborations with these countries on different matters, whether it be the naval sea exercises or trade or any exchange that happens. So I think it's important to carry forward on that strategy itself with much more conviction and strength, diplomatic strength, and not be the big brother, which we're not. So it's important to remain on that track.
Right. So after that, I think before we wind up, I would like you to have this section. Do you have this section for the aspirants, particularly civil service aspirants? Some advice, a little bit briefly, if you can tell about what are the few traits that I would not go into detail of how to prepare, but I would want you to talk us through how one can mentally prepare oneself for this preparation, particularly for civil service and life in general, and who should take the civil services examination, and whether this is the only way to public service. A little bit about that.
Well, again, a lot of questions there in one line.
Yeah. So we have to get the most of what we can from Ajita Agarwala.
So I would say that it's important to see civil services exam as just an exam. It's at the end of the day just an exam, and there is a code to crack it. There are certain books you gotta read. There are certain past year question papers you need to look at. There are certain tests that you need to take yourself and be aware of. The elimination process and all those things. When it comes to options, it's important to take subjects of interest while you're appearing for mains. It's important to be your whole self in your personality interview. So it's a lot of those kind of things when you take the exam to crack it. But if civil services is the only way to make an impact in the world, definitely not. There are so many other things you could do, and that's a prompt for another conversation. But there is no dearth of things you can do in the world today to make an impact, and I can't stress on it enough. And as to who should take the civil services, well, people who think that civil services is the only route to make change happen. Because you will be faced with a lot of challenges when you're in the civil services. You will be faced with no infrastructure, no resources, going to places which are so far apart, not having telephone connections or waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning or working till late in the night. I mean, it's not an easy lifestyle to have. You will have to make a lot of personal life, sacrifices. You will have to give up so many things which would be important to you, which is like birthdays of your kids, or like your own wedding sometimes. So it's not an easy lifestyle choice to have. You will never be able to leave your headquarters without permissions. You'll never be able to go abroad without permissions. There are a lot of
Absolutely.
things
That's the big
that
thing.
go that go into the fine print of being a civil servant, and people are not aware of that. You will be moving places every 2 years, 3 years, displacing your whole family, displacing yourself. So you have to make peace with a lot of those things if you choose to be in the civil services. And if impact is what you want, then there are so many other ways to make that.
Right, right. Very rightly put up. So as prelims is just around the corner, couple of months, I guess. Any
Mm.
advice for those who are taking this year's prelims? I mean,
Lots of
because
test papers,
this,
lots of
this is
test
the time,
papers.
lot of nervous energy. So
Oh,
what
I
would you
hate
suggest?
the films with my gut. Like, I hate it. But I would say take a lot of tests, do a lot of test papers, and do a lot of previous year question papers. Follow the trend, because that's what is important while you're taking prelims. It's just a matter of one question or two if you get in or not. So it's very important that you keep your calm during the paper and do not panic, fill the right bubbles, and keep everything on your tips for last week revision, and things like that, because you don't know what comes up. You might have read something when you were a little kid, and you might have that instinct to answer. So you should keep that instinct alive, but you should also keep the number game alive. Like, you should know how many questions you need to take. You should know how many you can let go. I always say there are probably 10 questions which are not meant to be answered. Figure those 10 questions out, cross them out in your paper. You do not need to answer them. You're not supposed to know them. Do not fall into that trap. Do not get yourself some negative marks there, because nobody's going to answer them. So figure out those
Mhm,
questions, and
mhm.
be sure of what you're going for in the first round. When you go through the prelims paper, maybe you will get 40 questions, and that's fine, but those 40 are just yours. You've bagged them, be confident in them, and the rest of them you have to guess. So up your guessing game.
That's lovely. That's for the taking for the aspirants. Solve a lot of questions, keep a cool head above your shoulders, and be prepared for the unknown, because everything under the sun is going to come in the examination. So be prepared, arm your arsenal and fire your bayonets, and you're going to get a good one here. So this is, ladies and gentlemen, Ajita Agarwala, a dear friend and a person who is a jack of all trades, wearing so many hats and having a very, very illustrious career, be it civil services, be it studying from Ivy League universities, serving in the top international institutions like the World Bank, and obviously in the G20 as well, writes in various newspapers as columnist, and a lot more, ladies and gentlemen. And what is next on the cards, Ajita? If you can little bit, uh,
I'm writing a book. It might come out
oh, well,
soon.
that's
Yeah.
lovely. I would love to read that. Yeah,
I'm sure to send it across when it gets published.
wonderful, wonderful. So thank you so much. Any concluding message for the wider youth and the wider audience who are listening to you before we wind up? Just a concluding message if you have for the audiences.
Keep your eyes wide open and work hard and work smart. It's important to stay close to your central focus. It's important to realize what that central focus is, and do not go towards the periphery too much. And travel a lot. Change your worldview by challenging and engaging with a lot of people. Have those 100 conversations. Open your worldview.
Right, right, right. That is so lovely. I think I just want to continue on and on with this conversation because I can't have more of it. So, ladies and gentlemen, very dear friends, Ajita Agarwala, and this is this for this podcast. We will come up with another episode with the next podcast where we'll bring another achiever who will share his or her life. So, thank you, Ajita. Thank you for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It was really nice being here.
Same here. Same here. Thank you.
Thanks.